I co-founded Dandelion in 2017 in order to make geothermal heat pumps more affordable and just easier for people to get. Geothermal heat pumps have been around for a while. They're out there. They just haven't been adopted in the United States on any scale that's meaningful. We need to transition millions of buildings from burning fossil fuels to heat over to renewable energy. And really, there's no better source of renewable energy right there, ready to be taken than geothermal, especially in places where it gets really cold in the winter. And so, geothermal is just this baseload, abundant source of energy already right there underneath all the buildings. There's a lot of reason to believe we can actually make geothermal a scalable mainstream technology here too. One thing that we've done at Dandelion is we've partnered with one of the largest fuel oil providers in the Westchester area. They're a company called Robeson, in order to train them to install geothermal, and then they're pitching geothermal to their fuel oil customers as a cost-effective alternative, because they know that they're not going to exist as a fuel oil provider for many more years. They just know that. And what better work can we do as people who care about climate than leverage that workforce that already has tens of thousands of customers that they're ready to transition over? It just seemed, to me, it's like a no-brainer. So what was so motivating to me is seeing that there were these solvable problems, and if we can solve them, it could just make such a massive impact on emissions. We're seeing the demand for heat pumps scaling very, very quickly. I think this is our moment. As a geothermal industry, we have a solution, and a lot of homeowners want our solution. So this is our moment to really demonstrate, yes, this technology, geothermal heat pumps, are the solution. I don't want to make it sound like this is only homes. This is the built environment in general.
Of Geothermal Rising. I'm very excited to be here with you all today. A brief thank you to our organizers. This event is always so well put together, and this year is no exception. The question for our panelists today is, could geothermal greenhousing be the future of food? And we will be exploring geoagriculture and its revolution. We are going to give our panelists some time to introduce themselves, and as well as introduce themselves and how their expertise applies to this topic. So we are going to start off with Jesse.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the whole world. I'm excited to be in this panel. I'm Jesse Nyokabi. I'm from Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm currently one of the Kenyan ambassadors at ImPPPact Global Alliance, where we are dealing with looking for ways on realization of sustainable development goals using people's first public-private partnership. And since I come from the green energy sector, my work has been on looking on ways in which green energy, that is geothermal included, can be utilized in the realization of the different SDGs. One of the areas that I've been working on is on how geothermal can be utilized in climate smart agriculture and agriculture 4.0 towards the realization of the different SDGs. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to a great session.
Thanks, Jesse. Let's move over to Karl.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Again, great to be on this week of discussions around geothermal, and yeah, this topic is really one that personally I'm really excited about in general of what geothermal can do to growing economies, and especially where we are today in looking at food security and how we can remove some of the sort of logistical issues regarding food around the world and make it more of a localized process. So I'm the CEO and founder of or co-founder of CeraPhi Energy, and we see geothermal as a key game changer in the energy space, not the silver bullet, but certainly something which can give us a cascade of benefits. And agriculture is actually one of the key ones of the benefits that we really want to try and focus on, specifically for the heat use. So really great to be on this panel and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks, Karl. Moving over to Martin.
Yes, hi all. Thanks for joining us in this live event. My name is Martin van der Hout. I'm from the Amsterdam region in the Netherlands. I am a son of a grower. Worked in greenhouses about all my life. Studied horticulture. Was in energy business doing gas and power commodity trading, because energy is really a high topic in the Netherlands in the high-tech greenhouse industry. And also geothermal came up about 2007, so getting pretty popular because it's fossil free. Let's say my most formal role in geothermal in the Dutch industry was to be the director of the Association of Geothermal Operators for many years. And in this role, I discussed legislation and all kind of discussions on license to operate with governments, but also with other parties. So I learned a lot, and geothermal is really in development in Europe. And the last 2 years, I'm now working for myself, and one of my projects are under the International Geothermal Association. My main focus is on public-private partnerships and how to come to a nice setting with all of us. So great having you here. I'm curious about your questions.
And then thank you, Martin. Let's move over to Mei-Mei.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mei-Mei Pickering, and I am co-founder, president, and CEO of Viridly. We are an integrated geothermal startup, and we are looking to scale up the development of geothermal energy by de-risking the exploration for geothermal power, by building geothermal greenhouses alongside geothermal power plants to produce faster returns, and also by producing new generator technology that will improve the power output of our power plants. So we're taking a very holistic approach to geothermal and trying to improve processes along the way. And I see a lot of potential for geo-agriculture and geothermal energy working in synergy with food security and tackling climate change. So I'm really excited about our session today. I come from an oil and gas background, so I'm actually a geologist by background, and I worked in oil and gas for over a decade. So.
Great. Thank you, Mei-Mei. I just wanted to reiterate that you can all drop any questions you have, any follow-on questions into the chat, and we will be giving them as we go. So please do not be shy about those questions. And we will jump into the questions for our panel, and we'll start off with a question for Karl. And it's a loaded question. So can you briefly discuss the benefits and challenges of using geothermal for geo-agriculture?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. And yeah, interesting question. I think it's one that a lot of us would like to get more answers for. Starting with the some of the challenges, I think where we're certainly in the space where we are, which is really looking at it for a sort of set of eyes from an oil and gas industry perspective in a transition, is trying to make that connection between how does agriculture fit my business model. I'm an oil and gas company, I have a transition to do, etc., and how does that fit into my model? I think that's a big challenge to try and sort of get that across to any company that's in the energy space of how it connects into the business case. I think the key where we're looking at these is a bit like Mei-Mei really is looking to plug in agriculture around energy sites, and our energy sites currently are primarily looking at the transition of existing oil and gas wells, primarily, or well sites, and most of these are in remote locations, and obviously in their remote locations they are generally sitting in agricultural or sort of greenbelt land that can generally connect and be used for agriculture. I think the benefits there are potentially enormous because certainly in growing and developing economies, food and receiving food and things like that is a key issue, and actually growing food, and also the climate change issue we have in front of us. A lot of that is logistic and transport driven. So being able to grow products locally, take the Dutch model, the Holland, the Netherlands model is really unique in that respect, and we're taking a lot of lessons from that. But yeah, I think, that whole aspect of being able to localize your food and your sort of, should I say, the basic needs in a local economy is really key. And if you can transition that and blend that with the generation of clean energy, and actually fill the gap of the commercial model by using agriculture as a sort of a way of bolstering the commercial model as well as the sales of energy generally, that's a huge benefit. And we look at it from a sort of mezzanine platform type process of various tiers of energy, going from high potential power from geothermal, going down the sort of scale to lower end heat from geothermal that can then be plugged into agriculture. And I also think we're in agriculture, some of the other challenges are that, certainly in climatized agriculture, you've got, various other things. So it's not just heat use, it's power, but you've also got things like CO2, which takes a big chunk of that heat. And again, if we can find ways of introducing oil and gas methods into that to actually inject that into greenhouse and carbon capture, etc., that also helps that process to, use the carbon in a beneficial way. So I think I'll leave it there. There's bound to be lots of other questions and things around the topic, but I'll leave it there. I don't know if Mei-Mei's got any comments, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that you can come at geothermal energy and geoagriculture from two perspectives, because first there is the general benefits of using greenhouses to grow food, which is that you actually have reduced land use, you have reduced water use, up to 90% of water use compared to natural food crops, and you can often get higher productivity. And I think being able to weather through the severe weather events that are happening because of climate change. We've got droughts out in the western US. You have flooding events that are, destroying field crops. That the controlled environment of greenhouses really provides an opportunity to have a much more stable food supply. So greenhouses in general have a lot of benefits. And then you add in geothermal energy, and you just get outsized returns from that. You have reduced heating costs from geothermal energy. You can reduce winter heating costs in cold climates by up to 90%, which amounts to 10 to 15% of overall costs, cost reductions in the operating expenses. And you also get increased productivity, especially in cold climates where you might only get 2 growing seasons out of a standard greenhouse. If you add in heat to that, you can get a 3rd growing season. So suddenly your yields go up by 33% just by adding in that extra season. And then, as Karl obviously said, the carbon impact and the ability to fight climate change. So food production worldwide amounts to over 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. A lot of that comes from actual crop agriculture, between the use of heavy machinery for harvesting and the carbon dioxide emissions from those machinery, as well as fertilizers and pesticides and things that give off gases. So in a controlled environment inside a greenhouse, a lot of those emissions go way down. So I think you're really looking at geothermal energy being able to help reduce things across the board. And by our calculations, a commercial greenhouse that uses geothermal energy, the reduction in carbon emissions just by getting rid of fossil fuel and wood-fired boiler carbon dioxide emissions, it amounts to over 6,000 metric tons a year. So when you start building up these greenhouses, it creates such a wonderful effect of reducing emissions across the board. I do also see challenges to doing it. We have had geothermal greenhouses in the past that were not always successful, but there are also, very successful cases in the Netherlands, in Kenya. But I know that there have been challenges with product pricing and being able to weather the price shocks that come from just, growing fresh produce that goes bad and putting it into a market that may be subject to foreign imports. and you have problems with water rights. So geothermal resources may not be located in areas that have ample fresh water. And you also have, if you're drilling water wells for that, you might have geothermal outflows that could contaminate your water supply for irrigation. So there are things to be very much cautious about with regards to geothermal energy and greenhousing. So that's something to weigh and balance. But I think kind of what that boils down to is that you are taking two different industries, geothermal energy and horticulture and agriculture, and you're having to forge communication and relationships and making sure that you are identifying all of the risks that come with that and putting in place the plans to mitigate those risks. So I think those things can be dealt with, but you just have to be aware of them in advance. So that's kind of my take. Oh, and one thing I also want to make sure that we don't ignore is that geo-agriculture does not stop at greenhouses and geothermal greenhouses. There is also the ability to apply geothermal heat for food drying and dehydration, for pasteurization and sterilization, and for canning and processing vegetables for canning and long-term storage. So those all use large amounts of heat.
Thank you, Mei-Mei. And thank you, Karl, for your answer to that question as well. And again, I know it was a loaded one to start things off, but we're going to move over to Jesse. So current events can dictate how we utilize geoagriculture. And I'm curious, how does geothermal for food production fit into today's, and this goes back to the previous panel, but into today's geopolitical climate?
Thank you. When we look at the geopolitics, one thing we are sure of is that there is fundamental changes that are taking place in the global energy system, which will affect almost all countries and will have a wide-ranging geopolitical consequences. Geothermal has moved to the center of the global energy landscape, taking into account its contribution to the battles against air pollution and climate change. We are in a decade where we are saying geothermal anywhere is no longer a wishful thinking, but a reality. But also, we are in a decade, or geothermal decade, where we are saying that it's possible even for the oil and gas to come on board in terms of geothermal energy production. So we are looking at it from this point of view, whereby now it's possible to utilize geothermal for direct use, and it doesn't have to be concentrated in one in a specific geographical location. That is contrary to the way we used to know it in terms of the conventional geothermal systems. So nowadays, it's now possible to have anywhere, anytime geothermal. These have led to decentralization of forms of consumption of geothermal, and also will lead to the democratizing geothermal energy, such that geothermal energy will not just be associated with just specific countries as we know it currently, but it will be geothermal for any countries globally. So in this way, if we are able then to have geothermal anywhere, and we can be able to utilize it through direct use, then we are able to use it for agri-food industries, whereby we can be able to support sustainability. Geothermal is able to support sustainability. This geothermal, if we use it for food production in those democratized areas and decentralized areas, it means we don't have to bear the cost of waiting for to import from other countries. And looking from the point of view of what has been happening, like if you look at an example of Africa, where you find that when it comes to things like wheat, we depended on Ukraine. Now we don't have imports from Ukraine. You can understand the situation that we are having here in Africa. So this dependency that has always been there, can we look of a way whereby we can utilize geothermal and at a decentralized level and be able to utilize it in a way whereby we are able to feed our nation in a way whereby geothermal, because it already has been decentralized, is able to support without having a lot of worries as compared to the situation that we are in. So we are looking also whereby in most discussion has been about generation of power from geothermal. And with that, you look, not many people have considered the direct use in terms of agri-food. Not many countries have considered it for agri-food because of the situation when it comes to electricity generation, and maybe for those countries that experience winter in terms of heating. So this is something that we really need to look at it and give it an exposure, especially to reach out to those people who don't know this is a solution, and they don't know that this is a question already. So we know the question, we know the solution, we are the people to go to them. So as we look forward towards the challenge of feeding people, we can leverage on geothermal direct use to enhance the food security of nations on every continent. And the challenges, though the challenge will have two dimensions, that is successful food production and enhancing production without harming the environment. The development of greenhouse geoagriculture demonstrates how sustainable energy can increase food production. This will provide solutions during this era when food production has been affected also by the climate change. Because also due to the climate change in terms of food production, there is a lot of changes that have come across. So we need to prepare proactively for the new energy era and its geopolitical consequences. There is a crucial need to encourage innovation, align socioeconomic structures and investment with the energy transition, such as geoagriculture. We need to strengthen international cooperation and plan energy systems that are just and inclusive. So looking forward, we'll need both the government, that is the public and the private sector, to come together, because this is a discussion that we can drive forward using both public and private together, so that we can see how we can promote sustainable economic development, improve the livelihood of our citizens, and also foster social cohesion and stability. That is my input. Martin, you can add something from there.
Jesse, thank you very much. Great point. And I was thinking about Kenya. I've been to Kenya 2 weeks ago to the Kenyan Geothermal Congress. I flew from Amsterdam, and the airplane was unloaded from roses from Kenya when I got in. And we also visited greenhouses in Kenya, which were heated by geothermal. Very interesting. You've used the word decentralization, and there are also concepts going on about a geothermal village, in which you can imagine that you have like a geothermal first producing a bit of power, and then heating a small greenhouse or doing some pasteurization or whatever. So those concepts for sure will be lifting up in the upcoming years. I'm sure about that. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I think we all can learn from each other. Whether you're, let's say, from a village which still wants to make those steps, or you are like a really big grower, large grower of 100 hectares with geothermal. Yeah, we all have our own challenges, but for sure we can interact, and great having this community now over. And please come up with your questions, I should say.
Great. Oh, thank you, Martin, for your input. Okay, moving over to Mei-Mei for coming back around to a point that Karl already made, but to expand upon it. How does this topic fit in with oil and gas companies and that are currently pivoting or have been pivoting to the geothermal space, and why would it interest them? Why would this topic interest them?
So I think there is a lot of opportunity for oil and gas companies to get involved in the geothermal industry and to start pivoting their operations to geothermal without doing a whole lot of extra work on top of what they're already doing. As you know, Karl said that they're looking at a lot of oil and gas conversions to geothermal energy, and that is fits really well with the geoagriculture world, because agriculture doesn't require the same high temperatures and high fluid flow rates that geothermal power requires. So there's really a lot of applications, direct use heat applications, that can come out of the heat that can be produced from existing oil and gas wells. They are able to start tackling the energy transition, meeting ESG goals, and also in the process, streamlining their operations. You'll have reduced P&A costs if you're able to convert an oil and gas well that is no longer producing oil and gas to thermal energy. So I think there are benefits. There are even tax credits available from certain states for oil and gas companies that start co-producing geothermal energy alongside oil and gas production. So there are definitely benefits. You can use the existing oil and gas workforce. So you're looking at fewer employee reductions, being able to train the next generation of the energy workforce. So those are some big opportunities for them. I do think that there are also challenges that come with it. The economics of a lot of geo-agriculture projects could be challenging for oil and gas companies who are used to raking in lots of money. So you have to really weigh each project, on a case-by-case basis on what you can do with it. And I think even the application of how you're using that heat is going to happen on a case-by-case basis. A lot of oil and gas operations are in warmer climates. So you might not benefit from adding a third crop in a greenhouse because they're able to get those third crops in existing greenhouses without adding a lot of heat. So maybe you'd look at some of the other types of direct use heat applications like milk pasteurization, because a lot of those areas have a lot of cattle ranches and dairy farms. So there might be different ways to use that heat than just automatically going to greenhouses. I also think that land use might be a challenge for oil and gas companies because they might have oil and gas fields that have pretty tight well spacing and well pads that are already all over the place. So where do you fit in building new infrastructure for, building a greenhouse or building a plant for pasteurization, things like that. So land use could be a challenge, and also converting the land contracts that are already existing. A lot of oil and gas operations are on private land rather than on federal or state land. So it may be more challenging to renegotiate those projects to make sure that they can get done these new type of operations. But that's not to say that any of those challenges are insurmountable. So I think it's just going to take some creativity and some real motivation on the part of oil and gas companies to see that there is so much opportunity there.
Great. Thank you, Mei-Mei.
I think maybe just to add to that as well is, what we've actually found is that actually when you look at the opportunity for a set of oil and gas eyes, the opportunity does have quite a lot of challenges, and you need to step out of that sort of box and look at it through a different set of binoculars in some respects. I mean, coming from oil and gas, we understand the challenges in many cases, and we have the ability to sort of look at it from a different angle. And I think, where we've seen a big swing change in the approach is really by taking the approach as more of an ESG proposition, and focusing on the transitional part of it is oil and gas transition into a clean energy source by working with the decommissioning aspect, removing the liability, or should I say changing the liability from being negative to positive, in which case you then have the ability to swing the balance sheet to a lower performing business model and not expect to get an oil and gas return out of it. But at the same time, taking an ESG value proposition, which is obviously key to a lot of oil and gas companies now, and especially small cap companies or mid cap companies, which may have stranded assets in multiple areas where they don't have the ability to do large scale developments on sites, and these become very, very cost effective and beneficial to work with. And most of the operators we're working with currently have scattered assets. They're not sort of all in one place. So they might have one well site stranded, in a country even with a few wells on it. But they have a decommissioning liability. We can help transition that and make that a positive balance sheet business case and in that approach. And I think the other thing we need to look at as well is the approach to geothermal. Are we talking about the conventional duplet type, conventional geothermal, where you're talking about high empathy heat and load to actually create power? Or are you talking about low empathy type temperature and heat where you can only get heat, and that heat can then be used for greenhouse work? And I also think about the aspect of cooling. Mei-Mei mentioned about the use of heat in hot countries. We're actually seeing the use of climatization, so bringing a heat balance down to the sort of 18, 20 degree, 23, 24 degree sort of areas, which create a climatized environment for agriculture, which enables crop growing and growing of crops that you might not normally be able to grow in an environment because of high temperature. So we're working in projects at the moment in different locations where to be able to grow products and commodities that weren't normally accessible in them areas, specifically high volume fruits, tomatoes and things like this, which generally a high volume transportation cost, and you have to bring them in from abroad. You know, if you can start growing them locally, the high volume fruits and demands, that's the sort of target that we should be looking at. And also in places like the UK, Europe, where, you know, we import, you know, avocados and pineapples and all this sort of exotic fruits from abroad. Again, there's reasons to do that here because we can grow them in a climatized environment, reducing that carbon footprint, and they're high volume and high and expensive commodities in general. So there is a high yield potential, but also a high return potential. So there's a whole load of areas. They're all different. They all have their different challenges depending on where you live. But I think, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, in an energy transition and where we are, each of these aspects are key for, you know, focusing on the region where we're looking at. There's not one, you know, cookie cutter model for everywhere. They're all different challenges in different regions depending on what we're looking at.
Great. No, thanks, Karl. This is sort of also an audience question, but I'm going to throw it to you there, Martin. What advances have you seen in this space over the last 20 years or so? And then how do you see it changing moving forward, say 5 or 10 years?
Well, 20, 30 years, that's a long time. I was a young man about 30 years ago, I must admit. But I see, especially in the last couple of years, a lot of innovation going on. And I said the first geothermal plants in the Netherlands were up and running in 2008. They produced about 70 degrees Celsius, which is okay for heating a temperature in moderate climate zones. But you see now a lot of innovation in greenhouse techniques going on, and it's about, of course, it's about energy saving. It's about using lights, although power prices are really high, so probably using lights in the next winter will be very difficult because it's just too costly. So the products will be too expensive, and the growers can't make money out of it. But of course, you see isolation, so more curtains in your greenhouse, saving energy. But on the other side, as Karl mentioned, you see also cooling. And the cooling demand for crops like orchids is very important. And there are other crops in the Netherlands also using cooling. And of course, if you go more to the, let's say, to the Spain countries with high temperatures, cooling is getting even more important. And if you do cooling combined with geothermal, you can already think about this aquifer thermal energy storage. So shallow geothermal, in which you produce heat in wintertime and more or less store the cold, which you can harvest from wintertime, and you use that cold in summertime. But these configurations are quite, let's say, difficult to explain. It's not conventional geothermal with a doublet just producing hot water. But I see a lot of combinations which are possible worldwide, and of course it's depending on the subsoil, about aquifers, etc., about legislation, about power. But I should say for every configuration, you can think about a setup with a specific kind of geothermal situation, which more or less can do the baseload thing. So the baseload heating and probably also cooling. And then you come with a combination with heat pump, so it's getting already, let's say, challenging. And if you calculate that upfront, it's always important to know the heat balance over the year. And this heat balance probably will be easier to calculate in an existing greenhouse because you already know what the gas consumption is over a year. But if you think about new setups, you have the chance more or less to do an integration, both for saving energy, but also, let's say, using the geothermal, which is, let's say, the easy accessible geothermal. And I can imagine in Kenya, because, let's say, the temperature flux is so high, it's easy to harvest about 80 degrees. So why should you mind about isolating your greenhouse so much? In night, it's still 10 degrees, so you need to heat up your crop. So it will depend of the situation of the subsoil, but also of the heat demand, what the best, let's say, affordable configuration is. And this is integration of innovation. And to do this on a proper way, you need all different, let's say, specialists talking with each other. And I think this is the challenge we have in our generation, because this is real innovation. And if this balance in this conversation, let's say, is out of scope, and you have too much discussion from I should say from the source, so saying, well, we want to go for high temperatures, etc. The customer of the heat probably won't manage it at all, or it's not affordable anymore. So I think there's a need of really, let's say, high quality pre-feasibility studies in which you can calculate, let's say, from a higher level, what the best configuration can be. And this sounds all pretty technical. I also want to emphasize on the fact that we as a community need to be aware that there is always a public, I should say, public support in it. It's about legislation. It's also about de-risking, because some risk cannot just be insured by the market. So this private-public cooperation, I should say, is needed to make it really work. And summarizing your question about the advantages of the last 20, 30 years, I think we learn a lot. I think these decades are exploration years, but we are now in a decade of geothermal, so we really need to go forward. And I should say it's about communication with each other and asking questions to each other. And of course, the oil and gas sector has a lot of disciplines, has a lot of specialty, knows everything about the subsoil. But speaking to a grower is a different kind of, let's say, communication than speaking to a oil and gas operator. So it's also about changing your mind in different cultures and different business models, and this in the end will more or less make the full value chain, both of the, let's say, the geothermal part and the agricultural part, stronger to be connected. And of course there will be new companies formed which have their own specialties in this value chain, and I also have to make the point that, let's say, this professionalization of the oil and gas value chain is so much that we have so much specialists on each point of this oil and gas. And of course, because those specialists more or less knows each other for about 100 years already, they make a great job. But those different specialists who can, let's say, communicate in an easy way in the geothermal value chain, that's a bit shattered, and probably we even have some gaps in this value chain. So we should also be aware about filling up these gaps with good projects. And I think it's also very needed to, let's say, to make the right showcases, to learn from each other. And the challenge in that is also have this data and experience available. So a lot of work to do.
Jesse, do you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, sure. I would like to come in also and continue with what Martin is talking about. We never happened to meet with Martin during the Kenya Geothermal Congress. We never made it. But one thing I was also considering, and it's something that maybe to further what he was discussing about, when one of my work that I'm doing currently is on how we can enhance flexibility of geothermal. And one of the questions that has been ongoing is, can we tap some of these geothermal heat and store it and use it for agri-food as part of offering flexibility for the geothermal power plants? So that is one of the questions that has come across, and I know along the way and along the days we shall get a chance to discuss more and see the way forward. I may not talk about that years ago, because I know that years ago I was 1 year old, so I might not talk about it here, but I can talk about what I foresee, and I would like to borrow from the African context because of some of my previous work. And there is a global decarbonization agenda that has necessitated socio-technical and political economy recalibration across the world. Yeah? And one of the fundamental issues is about to decouple the economic development from carbon-intensive industries. So, citing examples from African context, there are some petro-cities, as we call them, that grew courtesy of petro economy. And I would like to give examples like Hasimesalda in Nigeria, Rwanda in Angola, Tripoli in Libya, and Port Harcourt in Nigeria. These are petro-cities that grew courtesy of the petro economy. So there is a major Africa, these are major Africa petro-cities that rely on the petro economy. And they don't have like those ambitious policies that can help them decarbonize. So one of the questions has been, could retrofitting their oil and gas infrastructure for geothermal production be a solution? And if so, if it's possible, could geothermal energy direct use in geo-agriculture be the future of these petro cities in terms of food production for their countries? It will just a matter of aligning our thinking from what we have known as norm to asking ourselves, how can we further this discussion from what is norm to what might be seen like not so that normal, but at least we can do it, because all we want to do is that we still want these cities to continue being the cities they have been, but now from the, depending on the petro city, we can orient them in terms of going to geo-agriculture and be able to produce food for their country. So toward this deliberation, we need to include recalibrating both demand and supply energy side of energy across those cities, bring them shift in the economic dynamics of their petrol dependency, and governance reform to promote clean energy democracy and energy decentralization, which geothermal is one of the best means, since they have been in the industry of oil and gas. To shift to geothermal might not be that challenge as compared to other clean energy. So we can help them so that to adopt an expert approach in terms of decarbonization with the specific geopolitical context. So for, borrowing from what Carlos talked about the ESG, can these companies that are working in those petro cities maybe partner with the government through public-private partnership and be able to see how they can utilize their infrastructure for geothermal, for agri-food, and through that they will be able to have food production and also be able to showcase sustainability practice, which may create value proposition and marketing strategy for those companies, along with bringing new capital and which will propel geo-agriculture. So that was my thinking in terms of what looks like the future in terms of some of these petro cities in Africa.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. So I'm going to go to some audience questions. So a little bit of rapid fire here for you guys. So I do want to come back to Karl because you touched on this. And the question was, can you just comment on the impact of going all in on this type of work and geoagriculture when it comes to CO2 abatement and just sequestration?
Yeah, I mean, on average, there is some ratios we're working with Dutch sort of the Netherlands sort of expertise, and you know, we currently have a number of projects ongoing, looking at specifically in the UK, and some of these are overseas. But starting with the UK, you know, there is a consumption of electricity on average, which is used per hectare, which is currently sitting on average around about 1 megawatt of electricity per hectare for operation, and probably around sort of 0.5 to 0.7 in heat capacity. A big chunk of that electricity is currently used to artificially produce CO2 or bottling it in for a gas point of view. Obviously, with the price of gas, like Martin's touched on at the moment, you know, it's had a big impact over the last sort of 12 months on the agricultural side, and to the point where, you know, some agricultural, you know, businesses in Holland have had to, you know, default on their gas, should I say, purchase, and it's cheaper for them to basically remove that cost from their business. And let somebody else have the gas or sell the gas on than it is to produce a product. So I think one of the issues we have with, one of the things we've been looking at with the oil and gas area is that if you have got oil and gas well sites, some of the wells might still be producing, whilst you have other wells that are, should I say, either closed in or non-productive. And if you have that scenario, you can actually sequester the carbon from the producing side, certainly from any flared gas or capture side, which can then be injected in the greenhouses. So you're actually helping to decarbonize that process from a natural, from the natural hydrocarbon side, injecting it into greenhouses. So that's one way. The other way is obviously, if you do, be able to store CO2 into the reservoir, you can actually draw it back out again and use it directly for agriculture. So there are ways to combine this in. I mean, as we all know, we are stepping out of effectively, in some ways, the dark ages of geothermal and moving into a new generation. And there's still a lot of things we don't know, a lot of things we're trying and testing, and we have to move forward in that manner and, try these applications moving forward. That's the only way we're going to step forward. It's the only way wind and solar have developed over the last sort of 30 years to where they are today. So we have to look at this as we are in a very virgin space with geothermal, but the opportunity is huge, and the opportunity to be able to do a multitude of things, from high temperature of producing power to lower temperatures producing things like low cost heat for greenhouses or low empathy heat networks and these type of things. The other thing as well is the middle ground area, which Mei-Mei touched on, which is all the processing aspects of it, the food, and not just food, but also in cattle and this type of thing. So you've got all the processing side of that, which all includes heat and cooling. So the opportunities do very huge, and I think getting into the CO2 side of it is something which is definitely worth oil and gas companies getting involved with this type of development, because there could be a lot of upside in the future looking at CO2 sequestration in this process, to be involved with the geothermal, especially when you're looking at closed loops and these types of sort of technologies which are focused on monobore type wells.
Great. Oh, thank you. We've spoken a lot about more rural landscapes, I suppose you could say, and I was curious, and I'm not sure who'd like to take this question, but there's a question from the audience about vertical greenhouses and using geothermal for vertical greenhouses in cities. Does anyone want to take that question? Oh, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, vertical greenhouse is I say high tech, using a lot of power to light the crops, and of course it's very nice. I say it's a niche market. Vertical farming needs a lot of cooling in the end. So what about geothermal heating? You won't make it. But I think the configuration will work on a sustainable way. If you, let's say, use the ATES, the aquifer thermal energy storage, to cool the vertical farm, which is more or less like a big concrete block of different stages high. And you can also think about harvesting the heat from this vertical farm and use it in a conventional greenhouse. So if you have like a configuration both with a conventional greenhouse using a lot of heat, and the other one is cooling, and probably you need some seasonal storage, I think that more or less that's the way how it works. But I'm figuring out about the cost price of a crop from a vertical greenhouse. If you have a power price of over 200, 300 euros per megawatt hour. Bit difficult, I should say, because the sun is free in the end.
Yeah, I think if I can just add to that, I think the vertical greenhouse is a sort of luxury concept. I think we've seen quite a lot of that in urban type environments where you have the ability, to get higher prices and grow products locally. But yeah, I think the cost element of it is really challenging. And we've seen that as well. We've looked at it, and I think coming back to the type of geothermal that you're trying to process, whether this is standard sort of aquifer steam type approach, or is this is closed loop taking heat, I think the closed loop side has a lot more value to be able to try and work with that, because you both have a mixture of the high temperature plus you need cool, because the cooler you can put the liquid in, the better into the return. So you create a better efficiency in energy. But I think, yeah, the big opportunity for vertical farming, I think, is still really the hybrid approach, where you use a combination of, you know, geothermal with something like rooftop solar and other things, which battery storage, and you can create a sort of hybrid approach. And again, you know, this is really where geothermal, I think, comes into its space, as being able to take some of the base load element out of the intermittency of wind and solar and these other things, and create more of a hybrid solution. And again, these are other things we're looking at, is how to work together with other types of renewables to create the holistic hybrid solution. You know.
Great. No, thanks, Karl, for that follow-on. Okay, so we're running up on our time, so I just wanted to let you all have the last word. So I'm going to start with you, Jesse. Any closing comments?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. This is, as we always say, this is the geothermal decade. It's upon us, since we know how much geothermal can offer to this world. Let us go out, let us showcase the solutions that people may not know that they exist, and let us put geothermal on the map of the world where it's supposed to be. This is the geothermal decade. Thank you.
Kelly, are you there? Shall we do the summarization ourselves without a moderator? Mei-Mei?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think geoagriculture with geothermal heat has a lot of opportunity in the future. I think we really need to recognize that it's a win-win scenario for everyone. The agriculture aspect can help reduce costs and produce faster returns for geothermal. The geothermal industry can help improve some of the processes for the development of geothermal power. And I think geothermal energy can help the agriculture industry reduce their costs. So I feel like there's really a synergy that works here, and everybody can win, and we can improve food security. We can improve our addressing climate change. So I really think we need to look at this as a path forward, as a more modern future, you know?
Thank you, Mei-Mei. Karl?
Yeah, I mean, just a quick one for me. I think, you know, this is an opportunity for certainly oil and gas companies to look at an ESG tick in the box, which supports transition. And yeah, you know, at the end of the day, the whole global economy revolves around energy, food, and water. And you know, this is a big part of this whole process, is getting that food element into the agriculture side. And then from that, we can also, you know, look at water as well. So through desalination of direct heat use and things like this, these are all doable things. And it really does tick a box and help the energy sector, especially oil and gas transition. And we haven't talked about much about jobs, but jobs is huge creation in this aspect as well, for certainly growing economies and developing economies.
Great, thank you, Karl. Yeah, I'm more or less try to be the spontaneous moderator in the end, because we lost Kelly. From my perspective, I should say it's about cooperation in this decade. And I already mentioned the public-private support. From a European point of view, I should say we really should engage with the government about, let's say, setting the risk, etc., and organizing it well. So this is really a challenge. I'm wondering how other cultures are doing. I'm inspired by the Kenyan, and probably because the Kenyan aren't so locked up with this fossil system we are in the Netherlands. I'm jealous, more or less, and I hope to be inspired by all of you. Hope to have new contacts, and in the end, we go on our way and we go for more geothermal. So I love geothermal all, and speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.